final months of William's rule in England were, we might say, marked by this decision he made in 1085 to order a remarkable survey that we know today as Domesday Book. Um, what was its purpose? Was it just an administrative and financial instrument, or was it actually more than that?
I think it was more than that. In the end, and I always go back to well, the words of Jim Holt, Sir James Holt, in 1086. Who effectively says we don't need to think too much about what it was intended to do. It was. And there are two things strike me, two main things I want to mention here. First of all, of course, there were precedents. You go back into the Carolingian period and you have Carolingian polyptique and so on and so forth. None of them are necessarily, there aren't textual parallels, but a survey of landholdings is not without precedent. So there are precedents. And William was aware, and I hope this is coming over very clearly, he was very aware of the responsibilities of a ruler, whatever you make of him as a man. I think that it has many purposes, really, and this again is something that others have developed more since. It has many purposes because it effectively consolidates people around the new regime. It does, if we think in terms of the human aspects of the making of Domesday Book, the way in which French and English would come together in shire courts, and representatives of the hundred would come together on oath and give evidence, in which some disputes would appear, in which some disputes didn't appear but were then resolved later. It's almost, I could in some times think of it not as a great imposition of power, but as a gesture of reconciliation or attempted reconciliation. Yet at the same time, of course, it anchors the new regime in a legal framework going back to the holding of land on the day on which Edward the Confessor was alive and dead, tempore regis Eduardi. So yes, it is multifaceted, and in so many ways, I think it takes us. But also, of course, it means that forever, really, after that, or later, the Royal Treasury, evolving into the Exchequer, has the knowledge of not only who holds what where, but how much it is worth. And if you want to calculate taxes, reliefs, and wardships, all these taxes which are exercised when a great baron died, or when lands were in the hold of a minor or a woman, all of the sums could be made. They could add up the value and have some good idea of how much they should be charging. So it is a multifaceted operation, best understood as well, I think, not just by thinking great act of power, a terrible thing to do, as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the E-version says, but at the same time, if we think of it from the bottom up, it's bringing people together in ways which must often have been difficult, but by others may well have been welcomed. And as it finally goes on to say, the Chronicle, when it was done, he left England for Normandy, taking with him, as was his custom, as much money as he possibly could. I mean, so in other words, the exploitative regime in England is also present.
Well, he traveled to the continent and eventually got involved in the siege of Mont. Vexin proved to be, might say, a poisoned chalice offered to William's father by his overlord.
We must always think of William as leading a cross-channel life. And in fact, when you look at his religious patronage, and that of Matilda as well, it's Western European in scope. And he was invited to intervene militarily in the Iberian Peninsula, in Germany, in Italy, and so on and so forth. Yeah, a truly astonishing figure, yet one that still must retain the capacity to shock and sometimes indeed make us sad and angry.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that following the an injury, which is quite strange, really, he had fallen off the horse. Following that injury on Thursday, the 9th of September, 1087, William expired. I think shortly after dawn. To me personally, what happened next resembled a tragicomedy because his body was abandoned for several hours. Then it was sent to Caen to be interred in the Abbey Church of St. Stephen's in accordance with William's wishes. While during the procession, we have another fire starting in town, which meant that the monks alone had to carry the dead king to his final resting
Mm.
place. And then, on top of everything else, when the corpse was finally lowered into the tomb, it bursts open because the space was too small. So, leaving all
Yeah.
these anecdotic scenes aside, what did William's death mean to people in Normandy, in England, in his empire, if I am to use the term you have coined?
Well, yeah. Yes. Well, I think. Well, I quite like. Well, I do like the idea of tragic comedy. It's a tragic comedy. It is the removal of a figure who had dominated so many people's lives. It's hard to think of this psychologically, but it's someone seem who seems to be at the centre of everything, I mean, it's William of Malmesbury who writes about his ability to dominate his court with loud oaths and telling everyone what to do and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's the removal of a dominant figure and no one really knowing what to do, or at least having to work out what to do next. So it's both a tragic comedy and it's also a commentary on a life which should always fascinate us, um, for reasons which are, I think, not just relevant to the 11th century, but are relevant to the history of humanity, which is why I'm so pleased that the likes of yourself are still, are pushing forward with informing, you know, um, everyone about this important historical time.
Yeah, well, it
And
was
I
actually
suppose
my last question because I wanted to know exactly what do you think was William's legacy, really, at that point.
well, what is his legacy? Well, his legacy, oh dear, yes. Well, I've actually written something about this so recently, but his legacy was, well, one can think immediately that his legacy was creating a cross-channel empire which lasted until 1204, which was profoundly influential in the making of the English kingdom and the French state, and it did the United Kingdom and so on and so forth. I mean, I I mean, one can only speculate that what might have happened if his victory in 1066 hadn't taken place. Would the French kings have decided to try to take over everywhere? Question mark. Um, Likewise, would the British Isles have evolved as they did? I mean, so it is a huge legacy. But I also feel that to re-emphasise the point that I I keep making about the universality of the significance of his life, received yesterday a the Ukraine via an email attachment, of course, the Ukrainian tapestry. You know, someone has drawn a tapestry of the invasion of Ukraine in the after the manner of the Bayeux tapestry. Yeah, so actually, his legacy lives on because of the images it's created. And I suppose I'd also say that having given quite a few lectures after writing the book, he is quite popular in Caen. Go to York, and he's not.
For
I
obvious
mean, I'm
reasons.
generalising. I'm generalising wildly, but he still evokes passion and interest.